What's up everyone, Steven here from TechMaker. This is Building an NFT Bookstore Part 5. In the last episode, we basically finished up setting up some of our basic attributes for book versions. And we did a little code cleanup and refactoring. So in this episode, what we're going to do is actually go ahead and build out the purchase functionality. And I think what I'm going to do is maintain a difference between like purchase from the author versus purchase like in the market. So that'll be clear later. I mapped all this out on paper and I saw that that was going to be a challenge. So I just think separating those things. So buying it directly from the author from their initial publishing and then buying it secondhand later through the marketplace. Those should be two different actions, I think, just to keep things simple. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and jump into writing some code. And we're going to keep doing it the way we've been doing it and writing some tests first. I'm not 100% sure how complicated this is going to be. So I'm not sure if we'll finish all of this here or if it's going to span across multiple episodes. But let's go ahead and just dig in. So I'm going to close that in my text editor so that we don't see publishing anymore. And basically what I want to do, and again, I'm going to write some stuff that doesn't exist yet. So that's kind of a workflow. If you've not done it before, it can be a bit weird, but hopefully you'll get the hang of it. So let's come down here. I'm going to create another describe block. So I'm going to say describe purchasing from the author specifically, and we're going to say async. Whoa, what the heck? I hit a button I did not mean to hit. Async and inside of here, the first thing I want to do is say it, and we'll say allows an account to purchase a book version. So we'll just start simple. And this test is, I mean, it sounds simple, but in actual fact, this is going to have a lot going on. Even just setting up the test is going to take a little while. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we can go ahead and deploy a book. So let me open that back up. And let's get ourselves a new bookstore. Let me come down here to one of the later ones. Const bookstore, da 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 da. Okay, so we'll copy all that and then we'll close this describe again. Okay, so we've got our bookstore. We got a price going in here. We've got a currency, blah, blah, blah. So the problem is like, okay, we want somebody to buy this, right? Which means we need to have the ability to simulate actually passing the token in, and all of this kind of stuff. So what we need to do is actually create ourselves a fake token. And then we need somebody to own some of that token and so on. So it's going to take us a minute, but what we're going to do is actually set up an Erc20 token that functions as a placeholder for whatever currency they want to use. So what we'll need to do is have something that's like const and then purchase token equals await purchase token dot new, and then at the top up here I'll say const purchase token equals artifacts dot require, and then we'll require purchase token. And so this is going to break because we don't have a purchase token. So let's go ahead and queue that up. So we'll just run truffle test, and it's going to fail because we don't have that artifact. So we can see here purchase token, could not find artifacts for purchase token. So what I want to do is come over here and create a new contract, and we'll just say purchase token. And in my bookstore, I'm just going to copy everything, and we'll delete everything next. So let's just say all of this goes away. And let's go ahead and just say bookstore. I'll comment this out, and then that should be purchase token. And I'm going to put a little note here, not for real use, test purposes only, something like that. Okay, so let's run the test again, and we should be green probably. I don't remember what we copied and pasted, but that last test at least shouldn't fail for the same reason. Could not find artifacts purchase. Oh, I didn't spell purchase correctly. There we go. All right, let's try that again. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to write tests that lead us to need this thing to actually be an Erc20 token. So you'll see what I mean in a second. So if we come over here and we say, all right, so our purchase token, we want to create 1 million of them. And let's say that our, let's say const buyer equals accounts 1. And then again, if you left this blank, it would assume that it's accounts 0. So accounts 0 would end up with 1 million tokens here. But I like to do this and make it explicit just so that it's obvious from buyer. Okay, so we're giving the buyer 1 million, and in actual fact, we should give them, I'm not gonna make a variable here. Let's just do web3.utils.toWay, and we'll do 1 million, and then we'll do ether. I might make that a variable because I don't like that splitting like that. Well, hold on. We could just move that a bit probably. Maybe not, maybe a little more. There we go. That'll work. Okay, so we're saying, all right, the purchase token is going to be taking an argument of a quantity. If we run the test again, it should be broken. It should tell us you didn't give us the right number of arguments. Okay. And it did not. Why did that not fail? Huh. You know what? Let's just keep going and see. I might be missing something here. Let's see if I can, well, actually, let's go ahead and write a little test. I'm going to comment all of this out just so we're not confused at all. All I'm going to do here, and this is a test we can actually delete once we get it working, because we really don't care like test Erc20 tokens or anything like that. Let's just say let balance equal purchase token dot balance of, and then we'll say buyer, and we need to await this, and then we'll say balance, and actually let's just run the test. You guys are going to get tired of me running the test, but this is part of the workflow. Is just because the thing is, like, people don't realize this, but if you write a whole bunch of code and it's broken, you're kind of screwed. I mean, it takes you forever to actually manage to figure out why something's broken in some cases. So if you do it this way, where it's really step by step by step, I mean, you just fix whatever it tells you. It can be really helpful. So what I'm going to do here is just say is Erc20, and once I do that, well, it's going to blow up because I don't have an Erc20. So I just need to come up here and say Erc20 folder, and then Erc20.sol. Now this won't compile because it's going to say what purchase token should be marked as abstract. So what we'll do is say constructor, and then we'll say Erc20, which takes 2 arguments. One is going to be purchase token, like that. And then we got to give it a symbol, which we can say, what do we do? PCH, maybe PRCHS. I don't know. That sounds kind of weird. Purchase. It's like a license plate. Purchase. Okay, so let's run the test and see. I'm hoping it gives us an issue with the number of arguments for the constructor here, because that would make sense. Invalid number of parameters for undefined expected. Got to expected 0. That's interesting. So I feel like I'm misunderstanding what's going on here, but for the moment, let me actually do something really quick. Let me just make sure I'm not missing the syntax here. Let me pull a new window over here, and we'll just do open Zeppelin Erc20, and let's look at the docs here. That's not what I want. There's like a... Here we go. So, I'm missing something. Let's see if there's a better example. So here is basically, okay. So we have is Erc20 constructor. They're taking the initial supply. So I'm writing that out correctly. We don't have the decimals, but I don't think we need the decimals anymore. I think this is an old version. Okay, so I think we're doing this right. So maybe all I need to do is actually take in a uint 256, and we'll say total supply. Let's see if I still get an invalid number of parameters. Hopefully not. Sometimes the error messages that come back are confusing. Okay, so it did not explode. So now what we should be able to do is say balance equals, and then we'll do web3.utils.fromWay, and then we'll pass in balance, and then ether, and then we just want to assert equal balance and 1 million as a string, and we'll go check this out. So we'll run the test, and hopefully this passes. Well, it didn't pass, and I'm glad, because that would have been weird considering that we didn't actually implement the functionality. So what we need to do in here is just mint message.sender the total supply. And now our test should pass. Okay. Let's see how this goes. And if this isn't green, we'll have some other issues, but I think it should be. All right, cool. So that works. So now we're going to leave this test here for now, but we don't actually need that. This is just, we put this in place just to get the token set up and working. Okay. So the next thing we need to do, and how far am I into the video? I'm almost 15 minutes in. I'm going to keep going for a little while and see where I get to, but I may stop once we get the test set up, and then pick up in the next one with actually implementing it. So what we need to do is, so we got our price is Web3. We want 50 two-way. So I've got 1 million, so I should be able to buy a book. My currency now is going to be purchase token.address, and the quantity is 100. So, and then the author, we've got accounts 5, and then we're going to say bookstore.publish from the author. Okay. We got the, we're not really going to test this version price anymore. We know all that's good. That's from above. So now we need to write the actual test. So we've published a book. And let's see here. So we've published one book, so the book ID should just be 1. That's why I'm always setting up a new bookstore here, so I can count on the fact that the book that's published is the first one or the second one, depending on the context of the test. Okay, so what I want to be able to do is say await and then bookstore.purchase from author. All right, and what we want to do is purchase from the author, and then we'll pass in the ID of 1, and we'll tell it from who. From buyer, right? Now, one thing that's going to have to happen, and this is an Erc20 thing, we're going to have to give the contract an allowance before we can actually submit this transaction, I think. We might not have to. Let me think. There's different ways to do this. Typically, you might want to give an allowance to the contract, but maybe we don't need to. Let's just keep going like this. We'll see. So purchase from the author. Let's save. Let's run the test. It should be broken. I might keep going with this for a few minutes. Let's see. I'm kind of feeling it. All right, so we should get back that doesn't have that method or function. Okay, so we don't need this purchase token anymore. This is basically just a Erc20 standard, nothing special. So what we need is a purchase. So we'll say function purchase from author. And we can predict, what's that doing? Oh, it needs to be a visible, so public. And we can skip a little bit so these videos don't go too long and drawn out. I think you've got the point by now that I like to test every single step of the way. But we know that we're going to need to have this unsigned integer passed in, which is the ID. Just like these other ones, actually. I mean, all of these kind of had the same deal. So we'll have that. And let's run the test. And basically, we should be okay now. It was broken because we didn't have that function. But now we should be running it. Okay, so let's do this. Let's write some assertions here. So essentially what we want to do is say, let book version balance equal await, and then we'll say bookstore dot balance of, and let me actually check up here really quick in my first test. So it's balance of the address and then the ID, just making sure I didn't get those backwards. So we'll say balance of buyer and 1. And we should have book version balance, let's say assert dot equal book version balance 1. Okay, so let's run this test and let's get it working. So this should blow up and it should say 0. Okay, expected big number 0. So we should parse int here. So one thing we can do just to kind of shorten this up is say parse int around this await so that it converts that big number into an integer. Okay, but while that's running, let's come over here and let's actually make this work. So what I'm going to do is say book version. So remember, we always have to declare the data type before we set a variable. So we'll say book version equals, and so this is how this works. Like, we created this custom data type struct, so it'll let us use that as our own custom data type here. And then what we need to do basically is say we want to pull up the book version there, like that. So now we've got that here. It doesn't like something. What is it? Data location must be storage or memory. So I don't know which one. Sorry for all the noise. I'm trying to readjust my setup here a little bit. I don't know which one should be used here actually, and I should know that. Let's see here. What does that say? Unused local variable, function state util. Okay, yeah, that's not relevant. Okay, cool. So now sometimes like the compiler will tell me to do stuff, and I just do it because I probably should. And at any rate, okay, let's keep going. So what we want to do basically is transfer a book to this message.sender, right? So what we want to do is actually transfer this book version to the person who's buying it. And I'm just realizing how I'm getting ahead of myself with that. So really quick, let's go over to this Erc20 1155. Let's look at the safe transfer from. So what do we got here? So we probably want to use the safe transfer from. So we've got from, to, and then the ID, the amount, and then call data. I'm not sure if we need to pass in call data. Maybe we can just pass in an empty string. I think that's probably what it is. Let's copy this. Okay, so what I want to do is paste that there, and we'll say from, and actually, you know, I just realized something. To get this to pass, what we're going to need to do is have an author on the book version, which would make sense. And normally we could go back and we can go back and write a test for this, but in order for me to even get this to work, I'm going to have to do this. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's say address author, like that. And then here, let's pass in message.sender. Okay, so now I have an author on my book version. This is another reason why I went ahead and added this struct, is because it's a lot easier and obvious what you're doing to add stuff to it. This is way more readable. So what I want to do here is say the address from is going to be book version.sender. The address to is going to be message.sender. The ID here is going to be the book version ID. And then the amount is going to be the amount is going to be 1, and then the data here is going to be string. Now, we don't need to tell the data type on these arguments like this. I just left it all there for reference. So we'll have message.sender, book version ID 1, and then a string, and then semicolon. And let's see here, book version dot, that's not sender, that should be author. Okay, do we have any errors? It doesn't look like it. Okay, so basically right now we should be able to see our test pass because we actually are, I think, transferring here. It may fail. I haven't actually studied this ERC 1155 as much as some others. Let's see. Caller is not owner or approved. Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting. We need to give some sort of allowance. So I think what we need to do, if we come in here into this IERC 1155, we need to set an approval. Set approval for all. Kind of learning this on the fly right now, actually. Let's see what happens. Set approval for all operator. And so basically it says returns true if operator is approved to transfer accounts tokens. So what we want to do basically is add our bookstore contract to the list of approved contracts to manage this thing. So let's try this. So that method was called set approved for all. And what we'll need to do is the author, so the author will publish, and then what? I mean, basically we're saying that they're allowed to manage any, it seems like we're saying it seems like once we run this, and we can actually look at the underlying code. I'm just looking at the interface right now because it's a little bit easier to read. I would assume that anything I create in the future, this contract is allowed to manage it, is what it seems like. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I've published my book here, and I can do await bookstore dot set approval for all. And then what I want to do is say, no, what do I want to do? I want to say bookstore.address. So basically I'm saying that the bookstore is allowed to manage my tokens. True. And then we'll need to say who it's from, like this. So the bookstore is allowed to manage the author's tokens. Right? Let's see. Let's run this test and find out. If it doesn't work, we'll have to go read the actual code and see if it's see what it's doing. But let's see. VM caller is not owner nor approved. So let's do, okay, hold on. So what we should do, this isn't going to work, but I think this might be what we need to do. So we're saying this person should be approved, maybe. If this passes, then I'm going to have to rethink this a little bit. Okay, so that's not what we want to do, actually. So I got to think about this for a minute. So basically what this is saying is here, the author is giving the buyer permission to transfer some of the tokens out of their own wallet. That's basically what that's doing. But we don't want to have to do that. We don't want to have to allow the buyer to do that, because that means anytime anybody wants to buy a book, it's going to say, we're going to have to whitelist basically that buyer or add them to our list of approved addresses. And you can kind of see that here in the underlying code. If we look at this set approval for all, it's requiring that the message sender is not the operator, so you can't set approval for yourself. And that makes sense because obviously we would not want to allow people to take stuff out of our own wallet. That would be bad. So this is an obvious security mechanism. What I was wondering though is if we could give the contract itself approval so that the contract could transfer on our behalf. But it seems like the case is that when we look down here at safe transfer, the from either has to be yourself, so you're sending your own stuff, which makes sense, or the is approved for all, so the from has to be, let's see here really quick. Maybe I am misreading this. Hold on. So let's look at this is approved for all from message.sender. No. So the operator is always message.sender. So the operator itself has to be approved. So the thing about this is it changes up the way I was thinking about the workflow just a little bit. So essentially, there's no way for us to make it so that the bookstore can transfer stuff whenever somebody makes a purchase. What we're going to have to do is split these into two separate contracts. I sense that this could be a little bit confusing, so I'm going to try to backtrack and explain just a little bit. So what we don't want to happen, we don't want to make it so that the seller has to approve people before they can make a purchase, because that's not how a store should work, right? Like, you should just be able to go into a shop, buy something, and that's the end of it. You shouldn't have to get on some list and then be able to buy. That doesn't make sense. And so what we want to do is have something that is approved in order so that it can sort of operate as a store. So what I think is the case, and I'm going to try to do this quickly, but basically what we can do, I think, is have another contract that actually handles the transfers, and we approve that contract. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to make a small mess right now just to see if this works. And then in the next episode, we're going to have to clean it up and kind of rework it, because it's going to not be great right now. But the idea is that message.sender, like if I start if I call a function on a contract from my account, from my address, I am message.sender. But then if that contract calls into another contract, that contract A, who's calling into contract B, contract A becomes message.sender. So what we can do is have a single storefront contract that is actually the approved address, and it's going to have this functionality, and that should work. So let's see if we can do that really quick. We're going to work on the naming in the next episode, but again, I can draw this out a little bit longer than normal because I want to kind of get this nailed down. We're going to have to work on the naming, because having bookstore and storefront and all this stuff isn't going to make sense. But let's see here. So what I'm going to do is say const storefront equals await storefront.new, like that, without the 0. And then up at the top, we're going to have const storefront is artifacts storefront, not storefront. Storefront. Okay, and then let's see. What I want to do for my bookstore is pass in the storefront like that, so that they're connected. Now I've already gone too far here, so let's run the tests. Let's give this video another 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully, and then we can maybe wrap it up. We'll see. Okay, so undefined artifact storefront. So we'll do a new contract storefront.sol, and in here, copy all this again, and we'll change this to be storefront. And this thing is not anything related to a token, so we can get rid of all of that. Let's come on down here and get rid of all of the code, save it, and run the test again. Now we should get another problem with our tests. We should get something, invalid number of parameters for undefined bookstore. So constructor here, we're going to have an address, and it's going to be storefront address, or just storefront maybe. And then up here, what I want to do is import storefront.sol, like that. And then here we'll say storefront, hold on. So we'll say storefront equals storefront, and then we'll wrap that. I'm gonna get a problem here with shadowing. Let's change like this. Storefront address. So address, storefront address, and then we need a semicolon. Okay, so now that's unused. In actual fact, what I want to do is get rid of this And then what we'll do up here is say storefront, private storefront. And that all looks like it's not breaking with the compiler. Okay, so let's come back over to let's run our tests and just see. I've written way more code than I've been doing this whole time. I've been pretty diligent until now. Let's see. Hopefully everything is green. It is not at all. What do we got in here? Invalid number of parameters. Okay, that's because, oh crap. So this is a problem whenever you start doing this. So let's do this. Let's copy this line. And let's paste it in each spot here. So hopefully this fixes everything. You know, you call this chasing red when you're writing tests, which is fully what we're doing now. Invalid address. Okay, and that's because I need to say storefront dot address. So typically you want to, when you're chasing red like this, and I don't know if that's a technical term or if it's just something I heard somebody say once, but basically when you do that, you really want to make sure that you time box it, because you can always hit Control Z, and go back to like where everything is green and kind of start over. But if you go too far, you get lost. So let me see. Did I create any new bookstores in the middle of a test? I don't think so. Let's run the test again. If this gets us back to green, I'm gonna feel good and we can continue on. Let's see. Okay, so we're good to go. Let's see if we can implement this the way that I'm imagining now. So as I said, this may get a bit weird, but let's see how it goes. So what I want to do to start is, let's change this to say storefront.purchase from author, 1 from buyer. Okay. So that means that we need to come over to our storefront and we need to write a function purchase from author uint 256, and that's going to be the book version ID. Hold on a second. I didn't mean to undo that. Okay, there we go. So we got our purchase from function back over here. So let's actually copy all of this for now. And let's just paste this here. Sorry, I'm kind of like having to think through this on the fly, which is always what I'm doing, but it's kind of weird right now. Okay, so I guess what I can do, we need a way to reference the bookstore from the storefront. So what we could do is say storefront.set bookstore, and then we can pass in bookstore.address. And if we run this, it's obviously going to fail because we don't have that. So what I'm going to do is say function set bookstore address, bookstore address, public. Okay. And at some point we'll need to restrict all this stuff so that it's only owner and whatnot. I apologize again if my mic is sounding terrible. I'm getting some feedback whenever I listen back to the recording a little bit, but I'm going to try to push through, and I'll try to fix it later because can't do that right now. Okay, so I'm going to make a little note here. To do restrict access to only owner, which basically means whoever created the contract, which will be us, should be the only ones allowed to execute it. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're also going to import bookstore .sol, and then here we'll say bookstore private bookstore, like that. And then here we'll just say bookstore equals, and then bookstore, and then we'll pass in the bookstore address, and now our two contracts are connected. So let's run the test and see if that blows up or not. And hopefully like the little clicking noise isn't bothering you too bad. It's bothering me whenever I listen back to my previous little segments. Okay, so now we have a failing test. And that's because, why? Well, it's because now I'm trying to call the purchase from author on the storefront, and it doesn't do anything. So now what we need to do basically is call our bookstore. So what we can do is say bookstore.purchase from author. And who do we want to purchase from? We want to basically have where's bookstore? So inside of here we need to change a couple of things. So first of all, what we want to do is say address buyer here. And then what we're going to do in here is instead of message.sender, we're going to do buyer, like that. Now what we want to do is, and again, I need to write a test for this, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of make a note here. So what we want to do is require that message.sender is our storefront.address, right? And the reason for that is, and again, I'm commenting that because I need to write a test for it before I actually put the code. That's sort of, a rule here. We have everything else we've done so far. It sort of falls underneath something that's being tested, but this is something that would not at all. So I'm just putting it in as a comment. And to do add with tests. Okay, but okay, let's have a look at this. So we got our book version. This I don't even think we really need other than to pull the author off of it, but that's fine. And basically we're just transferring to the buyer, and then back over in storefront, what we want to do is say purchase from author message.sender, and then the book version ID. So basically the message.sender is, so let's have a look at the flow here. So storefront purchase from author from buyer. Whoop, the wrong button. So this is essentially saying, okay, message.sender in this case is buyer. Okay, so in this contract we have buyer as message.sender. But once this contract calls into bookstore, now it's the message.sender. Now the nice thing about that is what we can do is say bookstore set approval for all, and then what we need to do is say storefront.address, and now this should work, I think. Let's run it and see before we get too cocky. But let's see what happens here. I think we should be good now. If we're good here, we'll cut it, and yeah, so looks like that works. So basically, let's just recap. We're setting approval for the storefront so that it has the right to make sales, essentially. And we're doing that from the author. And then we have storefront purchase from author 1 from buyer. So we should be able to do this now. We should be able to say who's buyer here. It's accounts 1, so we could say accounts 9. And then we'll check the balance of accounts 9 and just make sure that we're purchasing and we're, anyway, let's run this and see what happens here. So sorry, this video is getting a little bit long and the audio is annoying the crap out of me, so I'm losing my train of thought a little more easily than normal. Identifier, it's already been declared, I think, is the problem. Let's run that one more time. This is a pretty difficult setup here if you're kind of new. So hopefully you followed along. I've been trying to explain everything to the best of my ability along the way. If you got any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. This episode turned out to be pretty long, and this is my second one for the day. So yeah, I think tomorrow we'll get back into this, and we'll start by just kind of looking at how we can clean up this code a little bit, and we'll start with adding the restrictions to this. So one thing you may have noticed is we're not actually doing anything yet with purchasing. So what needs to happen is our storefront needs to transfer. So we'll have something that looks like, require, message. Well, what would it be? So we'll have our token, which will be like purchase token dot transfer, blah 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 blah. So we'll have that first, and so we won't actually submit this purchase transaction unless that takes place. What's nice about this, and this is sort of inadvertent, the storefront contract will be in charge of handling all of the actual transfers of tokens, I think. Well, we need a way to pull back the author. So that's another thing. I need a way to... I don't have access to the data on the bookstore here, not easily. Maybe I do. Maybe I can pull it back. I gotta look at that. I'll have to make this public. I'll have to make a function that's like get author, book version author. Yeah, so we'll need to write an author function down here, and then on my storefront, I'll have to look up the author via my bookstore function. So I'll get the author for the book version ID. We'll transfer them the money. If the money successfully transfers, then we'll go ahead and actually send them the book. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Essentially, we can use these public functions to get information. So we'll need to also get the price and the currency as well. So it's kind of interesting. We might refactor this into a different direction. The architecture is getting a little bit weird here for me. I like to kind of have things a little bit more clean, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, as I said, I'm going to cut it off here, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.